gotten up to about over $51 million. That was as at 2014, 2015. And then as at 2020, the figure was about $450 million. And this is a big question because we are talking about Nigeria, a country whose major source of foreign exchange, is crude oil, which is dwindling, really. The prices of crude oil are falling as well. And then we have issues with forex in this regard. And again, it's also a major challenge for the environment when a lot of people are generating their. And then what we see is that a sizable number of households are subscribed to this simple technology, this solar energy up for homes. And most of these people are in off-grid locations. Some of these locations are totally off the grid and they don't have access to electricity. And for some of them, they are on grid, but most of the time they don't have access to electricity. And in this study, one of the things we hypothesized is that the adoption of this technology should have an impact on the well-being of subscribing households. And then we are trying to answer some research questions. The first one is, how has the adoption of solar energy powered up for homes impacted the well-being of rural farming households in Kwara State, Nigeria? And then we also want to know the drivers of the adoption of this technology in the study area. This is a map, the solar radiation map, showing that we have this solar energy in abundance in most places in Nigeria. And then this is a map of the study area. This is a map of the study area, which is Kwara State, showing the Barutin local government, which is where we have selected in this study, where we focused on in this study. And the reason why we focus on this area is because it is predominantly rural, and then, it's largely agrarian. Most of the people are into farming, and for most parts of that local government area, they don't have access to electricity a lot of times. So this is the simple technology that we're talking about, where we have this first, the image we have in the first panel is what the technology is about. And then what we have in the second panel here is the lightning that we have. And then on the third panel, we have the switch. And then, of course, we have the actual solar panel that are placed on the roofs of houses. So what we did is a quasi-experimental design where we selected, we noticed, okay, the data we had as at the time this study was carried out show that 243 households had adopted the technology. And then out of these 243 households, we found that some of them were still using fossil fuel, but some of them were just solely using the solar energy, and we had 89 of them. And what we did was we now selected the 89 that were solely using the solar energy up for homes, and then we put them in the treatment group, and then we selected a multiple of that's 219 households. We assigned them into the control group. And then we constructed the personal well-being index, and some of the indicators that we use were the health, economic, environmental, education, and then we used the following tools: descriptive analysis. Then we carried out the t-test to be able to ascertain that people in the groups, that's people in both groups now, the treatment and the control groups, were actually at par. And we later used the propensity score matching and the probit model to carry out analysis. And here are some of the key findings. About 69.4% of these households were headed by male, and 67% schooling is about 5.88 years, which means most of them had just the primary education. The monthly income comes to about $168, and then about 60% of the households that we investigated actually had some form of remittances coming to them. Then the household size is about 8 individuals, and then on the average, each of these households had about 4 children that were of school age. Then in terms of their proximity to town, we have an average of 167 kilometers from their location to where the major town is. And for both groups, we had, that's for the control group now and the treatment group, we had them losing about 7 days to 12 days to respiratory ailments that they had to treat at some point in time. And the reason why this was important for us is because we are looking at some of the energy sources that they use. Those that have not adopted the technologies, the energy sources that they use were such that could pollute and even affect them in terms of their health. Then the result of the propensity score matching show that at 5% signal level, the well-being of the adopters generally increased with adoption. Then the result of the appropriate regression, which was to tell us the determinants of adoption, we found that age, the proximity to town, and the access to fossil fuel negatively influenced adoption, whereas the household income, the remittances, school-age children being in the household, flexibility in the payments, school-age, the pair effect, and the pursuit of life ease were factors that positively influenced them to adopt. In conclusion, one would say that adoption of these solar energy up for homes positively influences well-being of rural farming households. So it means that we should target efforts towards its diffusion because it provides an opportunity for us to be able to tackle the energy challenge that we have in Nigeria in a cleaner, greener, and sustainable manner. Some of the recommendations that we have made in the study is that the government and policymakers should introduce some form of subsidy interventions because we found that most of the people that had subsidy were willing to take on this technology. So it means that if you want to be able to diffuse this technology, there has to be some form of subsidies that will be in place. And then the distributors and the marketers of this technology should also extend their reach to the interlands. They should help to create awareness so that people can have access to it. Because like I said, if someone has to travel about 167 kilometers before they can get to the main town, it means that there are a lot of things that they are precluded from. So we are recommending that the awareness and the reach of the marketers should go further into the interland. And then again, because the peer effect could be found, to be significantly, possibly and significantly affecting the adoption, we are recommending that key individuals in each of those in areas that in the interlands should be influenced. When we are able to get these key individuals within the communities to adopt, it's going to be easier for us to get others to adopt and hence diffuse the technology. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Thanks a lot, Toyin, for this really fascinating findings, very high methodological approach you used with propensity score matching. So we are excited about your findings. We will discuss your presentation at the end after we have heard the other presentations. Therefore, I would like to ask you to stop your screen sharing for now. And I would like to invite our second presenter for today. This is Tonji Olivier Amusu from Natsiboni University in Benin. And he will be talking about enhancing tilapia resources conservation in a context of salinization in rural coastal areas of Benin. So I would like to invite you, Tonji, to do your screen share so we can actually listen to your presentation. Okay, great. We can see your presentation, so the floor is yours. You just have to unmute your audio so that we can actually hear you. Okay, I think it should be working now, Tonji. Floor is yours.
Okay, members of the panel, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Let me introduce myself. I am Tonji Olivier Amusu, a young scientist from Benin, and I would like to share with you some insight on enhancing tilapia resource conservation in the context of salinization in rural coastal areas of Benin, West Africa. In the next 10 minutes, we will show you how we formulated and answered a series of questions, namely the scope of the research, the methodology, some results and their interpretations, and what is the way forward. Ladies and gentlemen, tilapia resource preservation has the potential to address 4 of the Sustainable Development Goals at different levels to eradicate extreme poverty and hunger and to ensure environmental sustainability. In what way? By improving natural productivity as a business option for women and young entrepreneurs, by stabilizing overexploitation, and by improving resource availability. The overall aim is to establish an efficient conservation plan of tilapia species Saroterodon melanoteron and Tilapia guineensis in a context of aquatic salinization. The strong pressure from fisheries could be reduced with the development of large-scale and sustainable conservation of these species. Now, as scientists, when we advocate for the adoption of an innovation, we must be able to anticipate the risk involved and provide measurable mitigative solutions to the end users. More specifically, our objective were to, first, verify drivers that could influence the phenotypic trait of the 2 tilapia species. Second, determine the relationship between the environmental and anthropogenic problems and the salinization in Benin rural coastal areas. Third, investigate the tilapia's population adaptation to the increasing salinity. Fourth, identify conservation area for the various population sustainability. This slide details our roadmap. First of all, it should be noted that Benin, a West African country, has a coastline of about 121 kilometers, bordered by a series of lagoons of about 333 square kilometers, and many rivers and reservoirs. Accession of the 2 tilapia species were experimentally sampled from 12 villages in the coastal area of Benin, and this ran monthly from January to December 2018. Regarding the methodology, firstly, a literature-based situational analysis was conducted to identify the environmental problem affecting aquatic biodiversity while highlighting their link to water salinization. Secondly, 10 phenotypic measurements were carried out on 717 accessions of the 2 tilapia species. The sex of each tilapia accession was identified through manual session. The river's water salinity was recorded in situ. However, the ocean salinity data were retrieved from the French Sea Surface Salinity Observation Service. 4 approaches were used to achieve the aim of the study. First, the interaction patterns were analyzed and allowed to model the relationship between the phenotypic characteristics and the 3 factors: the fish species combined with the river of origin, the fish species with the fish sex, and the sampling river together with the fish sex. The interaction between the sampling rivers and the fish sex was not significant. Accordingly, the model used was fitted as the phenotypic observed value of the if specimen coming from the JF sampling rivers and having the K sex. Second, the degree of fish well-being and the fish adaptability was estimated using Fulton condition factor. Third, to assess population growth, we analyzed the relation between length and age of tilapia samples from the 4 rivers Frot von Bertalanffy growth model. The estimate of the asymptotic length of fish and the growth coefficient were used to compute the growth performance index. The age at length 0 was estimated using Poli's empirical equation. Fourth, various population entities have been identified and help characterize all the identified conservation areas. Two major environmental problems have been identified as contribute to the saline intrusion of rural coastal water in Benin. These are discharge of polluting substance and climate change. Tilapia population have been relatively adapted to the increasing water salinity of the rivers since condition factor was upper 3 overall its estimate. Extreme value of the asymptotic range of fish estimates were 11.07 and 11.73 centimeters for both species. The growth coefficient range from 1.2 to 1.3 per year overall subsumps. The population of Tilapia guineensis had a higher growth performance index than those of Saroterodon melanotero. The ocean salinity explains a tiny part of the salinity of the water sampled from the different rivers. In this piece, the river salinity revealed at least 57.13% to 92.44% of phenotypic characteristics variations. Here, interactions were investigated to identify drivers that could influence the success of a potential conservation program. The fish species river tip and the fish species fish-sex interaction had significant effect on phenotypic characteristics. Grand Popo Lagoon, Porto Novo Lagoon, and Lake Nokwe hold waters that have higher salinity in comparison to Lake Tao, and the lowest value of phenotypes were recorded among assessments coming from Lake Tao. This confirmed the adaptation of both species to the lagoon and estuarine ecosystem. Each species point to at least 2 clusters. So for an efficient conservation of this population, 3 conservation areas versus 2 conservation areas could be considered for Saroterodon melanotero and Tilapia guineensis respectively. Having reached this stage, let us recapitulate on our focal question. To what extent the rise in salinity in Benin coastal areas affect the phenotypic characteristic of Saroterodon melanotero and Tilapia guineensis? So this work gives important evidence to move toward more integrated management of tilapia resources in the coastal areas in Benin in the context of salinization. The fishery resources are encountering overexploitation, water pollution, sand mining, fish disease, invasive species, and climate change. The salinity of a coastal lagoon is mainly due to the toxic effects of anthropogenic pollution compared to the ocean salinity. The study also provides proof of concept of choosing right populations for each conservation area. To recall in a much simpler way, the investigated rivers are subject to a hydrological dynamic that is characterized by low seawater inflow from the tropical Atlantic Ocean. A leading inland origin of the salinity of this water could be confirmed given the low impact of the ocean. In addition, the growing presence of salt in soils and change in salinity in aquatic environment are major ecological disturbances related to climate change. However, the 2 tilapia species or the 2 tilapia populations have been relatively adapted to the increasing water salinity of the rivers. Under such a condition, integrated and participatory approach are worth adopting to ensure the sustainability of the aquatic ecosystem. Their strategy involves 1, strengthening and reinforcing regulation about fishery activity, encouraging aquaculture of mangrove-dependent aquatic species. 3, increasing the number of sanctuaries or classified areas. 4, developing an environmental monitoring program. 5, developing ecological zone ecotourism. 6, developing an integrated environmental education program. And 7, restoring the aquatic resources. I mean, aquatic plants and animals. I would like to express my earnest acknowledgement to the panelists. I pledge to a more sustainable aquatic environment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tonji, for this very exciting presentation. I think excellent field work and also very sophisticated analysis. So we look forward to discussing your presentation later. In the meantime, I would like to invite all of you, both the panelists and our participants. You can already use the Q&A, question and answer function to already ask questions or type in questions. I would really recommend that you already type in questions so that then we can actually have these questions for our Q&A session afterwards. So please, while you're listening, both panelists and participants, please use the Q&A function. And now I would like to invite our next panelist. This is Ms. Oluwakemi Odunjan from the Federal University of Technology in Akure in Ondo State. And she will talk about determinants of households' food security in Akure South local government area of Ondo State in Nigeria. Oluwakemi, we would like to invite you to share your screen so that we can listen to your presentation. And as I already said, I invite all of you to ask questions to all the presentations in the Q&A possibility. All right, over to you, Oluwakemi. Yes, we can see your screen is being shared. Just need the presentation mode and then we can start. And I think, Oluwakemi, you still have to unmute your audio so that we can actually hear you. Okay, we can see the presentation. You would just have to unmute your audio and then we can go ahead.
On that.
Okay, great. Please, Oluwakemi.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Oluwakemi Oduton. I'm presenting a research on the determinants of households' food security in Akure South local government area of Ondo State, Nigeria. Food security is a growing concern worldwide, and it has been defined as a situation where no people at all times have access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food to meet dietary needs and food preference for an active and healthy life. It is an indispensable prerequisite for the survival of mankind and economic activities. In particular, since the 2008 food price crisis, food security has been a key issue for many poor countries and a global problem as well. Achieving food security has been a major challenge and it has been given the first priority in achieving most fundamental human rights in all developing countries. The Nigerian food security situation is characterized by inadequate domestic food supplies and increasing food imports. The estimated 3.7% food production growth rate cannot keep pace with the 6.5% food demand, fueled by high rates of population increase. However, understanding of the situation of food security at household level in the study area is very, very important. Such understanding allows policymakers to better plan and take actions that address the specific problems, as well as development of potentials of different population segments. Specifically, the study described the socioeconomic characteristics of households, determine the magnitude of food security, and examine the determinants of households' food security in the study area. Primary data were collected with the aid of a structured questionnaire, and a multi-stage sampling procedure was employed in the selection of the respondents. In the first stage, Akure South local government areas was purposely selected, followed by the second stage, where 4 communities were randomly selected, and in each community, 20 households were randomly selected to make a total of 80 households that were sampled. Data collected were analyzed using a combination of descriptive statistics, food security index, and probit regression model. And this is just a formula for food security index. And this is also the model for probit regression. Results of the socioeconomic characteristics of respondents showed that majority, that's 72.5% of the respondents were male. And the mean age of the respondents was 47 years, which implies that majority of the respondents are still within the economically active age. If you also look at the marital status, majority of the respondents were married, having 75.4%. Most of them also had one form of formal education or the other, because only 13.8% had no formal education. The household size, if you look at the household size, about 58.8% of the respondents had between 6 and 10 household members. And looking at the major occupation, only few of them, that's 11.2%, had farming as their primary occupation. That's majority of them had other occupation, that's 57.5%. Based on the daily calorie intake of 2,260 kilocalories, about 40% of the respondents of the households were food secured, while 60% were food insecure. The average calorie intake for food secure households was 3,854.46 kilocalories. And for food insecure households, we have 1,564.3 kilocalories. The food security index was also calculated for food secure households, and the figure is 1.71, and for food insecure households, it was calculated to be 0.69. Results from the probit regression showed that household size, the level of education, number of income earners in the households, and the household health income were the major significant determinants at 5% level. At 5% level, were the major significant of food security status. However, household size had a negative coefficient, and this implies that increase in household size would lower the probability of households being food secured. Looking at the level of education, number of income earners, and household health income, they had positive coefficients. This implies that increase in these variables would also increase the probability of households being food secured. In conclusion, the proportion of food insecure households was higher than the food secure households. Majority of the respondents were involved in non-farming activities as a major occupation. The household size was found higher with food insecure households than food secured households. From this, it is possible to conclude that the households with greater household size are more likely to be food insecure as compared with households with smaller household size. The food secure households also had relatively greater averages on income level and a level of education of the head, that is the household head, than food insecure households. The result also revealed that the household size, the level of education, householders' income, and the number of income earners were the significant determiner of food security status of households in the study area. In general, in order to achieve households food security, strategies should be designed in a way that will focus on and address the identified determinants, as well as other factors that are useful to achieve household food security. It was therefore recommended that households should be educated on the need to diversify their source of income and also register with cooperative societies, which may be necessary for them to access funds considering their level of income. And also there should be a limit in population size through integrated health and education services. Thank you for listening.
Well, thank you so much, Oluwakemi, for this very interesting study on this important topic of food insecurity. Very good field research, excellent data analysis. And again, I would like to invite, I still do not see anything in the question and answers session. So I invite all participants, if you have questions for Oluwakemi or the earlier presenters, Tonji or Toyin, please write it in the Q&A so that we can collect questions for the Q&A session, which will start after the last presentation. Originally, we had scheduled 6 presentations here. 4 of the presenters are actually here. And I would like to invite next Africa. Africa Okello is from the University of Nairobi. And she has a very interesting paper, especially from the perspective of the bioeconomy. Remember, this is a panel of the ICABR, the International Consortium on Applied Bioeconomy Research. And in the bioeconomy, we always look for new sources of biomass. And Africa Okello will talk about feeds of the future, understanding farmers' perceived benefits and value chain governance of insect-based chicken feed in Kenya. Africa, we look forward very much to your presentation.
Okay, Prof. Let me get my presentation up. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, we can hear you very well. That's perfect. Now we just look forward to seeing your presentation on the screen.
Okay, so for my study, it's mostly, I created it in the format of a poster because that's what I had intended to present earlier on. So I hope that is still okay.
Of course, this is still okay. Yes, okay. So we can see your poster. So please go ahead, the floor is yours.
Okay, let me just try to zoom it in. Yeah, there. So my name is Africa Okello, and I'm a student at the University of Nairobi. I'm currently pursuing my master's in agricultural and applied economics. And I was part of a collaborative research between the university and the International Center of Insect Physiology and Ecology. Both of them are based in Kenya. So before I go into the details of my study, I'd like to, first of all, extend my warm gratitude to the organizers for selecting my study to be part of this prestigious conference, and also for its commitment to ensuring that researchers are still able to network despite the odds that we are currently facing. I'll be presenting to you my findings on a study that used focus group discussion data to try to understand the perceived benefits and value chain governance of the use of insect-based chicken feed. So the rationale of my study is based on the increased demand for poultry products, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa. And this will translate into increased demand for commercial feed. But all this is happening in a landscape that is already dominated by food feed competition. This basically means that the resources that are used for feed formulation are also used for human food production. So this creates a lot of stress on the already degraded natural resources, particularly the land resources and the marine resources. In particular, the protein ingredients that are used in feed production, that is the soybean and the fish meal, are also used for human food production. And this kind of competition creates some element of scarcity, which drives the cost of these ingredients up, and consequently affects the cost of feed. So what this translates into is expensive feed, which becomes very unaffordable for smallholder producers who form the majority or the bulk of chicken producers in the country. And also this has the negative impact that this has had on the livelihoods on the household economies is that farmers have been forced to either abandon the enterprise and convert their chicken cages into unproductive uses such as storage sheds or something similar to that. So this denies them a source of livelihood, some source of income, and creates a cycle of food insecurity, of poor livelihoods. Also, when you look at what we're currently facing because of the pandemic, whereby countries are forced to shut their international borders, therefore countries such as Kenya, which rely heavily on imported feed ingredients, are forced to depend on the limited or the limited supply of feed ingredients and feed products in the country, which further creates a lot of stress on the existing poultry producers and consequently affects their margins. So what the government advises is that the use of locally available feed ingredients, the use of locally feed ingredients such as the insects, in order to mitigate against these issues. So what ICABR has done is it has conducted research on an insect called the black soldier fly, which has commendable properties. And when you look at these properties, first of all, its ability to utilize organic streams. That is, it feeds on organic waste as the substrate. Therefore, it has the potential of reducing environmental pollution. It also has low carbon footprint compared to other cereal production, and it's very rich in crude protein. And this forms a very fundamental step towards environmental protection. So what does this study sought to use to elicit preferences or get insights from farmers in order to try to understand, before we launch this product, which has used insects as its protein ingredient, what do farmers think about this? Because this aspect becomes very important in terms of ensuring that whenever these products are launched into the market, they become adoption rates become favorable, or there's favorable adoption for this particular product. So the methodology that we used for this particular study, as I said before, is focus group discussion data, whereby poultry farmers from Kiambu County were invited for training at ICABR, whereby they were trained on how to rear the black soldier fly. And after this, we sought to get their perceptions on the benefits that they expect to get once this product is launched into the market. So we used a total of 30 poultry farmers to get the preference and their insights. So what we established from the findings is that, as expected, poultry feed is a majority of the farmers highlighted poultry feed, the cost of poultry feed as a major constraint, and also the issue of poultry diseases. So if I could create a link between the two, between these elements, these constraints, is that when poultry feed is expensive, millers are also unable to get the required amount for nutritious feed formulation. Therefore, they substitute this by adulterating or by adding very innutritious components into the feed, and this affects the immunity of the birds and therefore the performance of the birds, and we get situations of high mortality of chicken, and this also ends up by affecting the margins that farmers are supposed to get when they sell or dispose lower numbers than they had initially expected or anticipated. So when you look at the benefits that these farmers expect to achieve, of course, all of them responded that they hope that this feed is going to be affordable and nutritious. There'll be reduced chick mortality. And another point of concern is very few farmers highlighted the aspect of environmental protection. And this is mostly based on the lack of, say, knowledge or our limited awareness on such issues, whereby farmers do not know, or there's that aspect of information asymmetry where farmers do not know the development process of feed components, how they are from the point of production all the way to packaged or compounded feed. So even with the training, this is like what we aimed to achieve. We train them, we tell them that before you purchase this compounded feed, this is where it originates from, just to create that element of environmental protection, so that when such technologies are released into the market, they're able to look out for aspects of environmental protection. And this way we expect that, or we hope that with time, that farmers, smallholder farmers, will be environmentally savvy or conservative and something like that. So they'll be able to choose out products that are more friendly to the environment and say no to products which are detrimental to the environment, because this also affects their health, affects their incomes. There's all that direct and indirect impact to farmers. So when you look at the institutional factors, I could say that this is the major highlight of this also study, the institutional factors or the compulsory institutional attributes that we also elicited from farmers. Mostly these institutional features for governance basically means that farmers operate in an institutional framework, and the current institutional framework has had some failures, which, if they are allowed to persist, they may also say have a negative impact on novel technologies that are released into the market. So there needs to be proper addressing or proper intervention towards certain governance structures. So getting this feedback from farmers is quite important in order to also communicate these results back to policymakers and to expect some change. So majority of the farmers cited that public-private partnerships are quite essential. That is involving farmers from the design of, say, these novel technologies, the frameworks or the regulatory systems of these novel technologies is quite important, so that they feel like when these products are released into the market, they are appealing to them, and there's high adoption, and farmers also feel like they are part of the system, and they're not just technologies are not just imposed on them. Another fundamental aspect is a penalization of defaulters. This is what we currently have in the system, is that quality manufacturers who do not meet the standard requirements or the standards that are set out, they are either fined or they are sent to like short-term imprisonment. But farmers identified that they prefer that these individuals to be fined or like temporary closures of their enterprises, because they don't want these court cases which drag and have a very negative impact on also the incomes of these millers. Also, another aspect was the modernization of these quality checks, that is through the use of ICT, whereby this feed, they have some verification logos whereby you can easily send a text to quality controllers, and then you get a feedback, an immediate feedback to also guide your purchasing behavior, so that when you're purchasing this feed, you know that it meets the requirements that you hoped for. So what do these findings mean for us and for the future of insect-based value chain, insect-based feed? So this is an emerging value chain, and we expect that through these insights that institutional will get the attention of regulatory or policy makers, that farmers are looking forward to alternatives that are also kind of environmentally friendly, and attention, if they're given like enough attention, there'll also be improved adoption of this particular environmentally friendly products. And another particular insight is that through this study, also entrepreneurs or private investors will be able to invest into these environmentally friendly technologies and increase mass production. And if there's mass production within the country, then whenever there are interrupted supply chains, it does not have this extreme negative impact on local production, and the country, it assists the country in making strides towards national self-reliance. Yeah, that's the end of my study. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Africa, for presenting this really innovative and interesting study on insect-based chicken feed and showing the potential and also governance aspects in the value chain. Very exciting. Thank you, Africa. So this concludes the presentations. Unfortunately, two foreseen presenters were not here, but I think all of you made really up for it. So we had 4 exciting presentations here. And I would like now to come to the question and answers and the discussion. And we agreed for that we will actually stop the recording. So your presentations will be seen afterwards, but now we can actually start the discussion. I do still not see any questions in the Q&A, unfortunately. May I just invite the participants? Here we have 8 participants. I would like to welcome among the participants also Carl Prey, the president of the ICABR. He has actually joined us, even though I think it's like in the middle of the night. But maybe I can invite, just a second. Maybe I can invite Carl, if you have a chance, to say a few words to our panelists here.
Well, I wasn't really planning to be a participant because, as Regina said, it is 3 in the morning or something like that in the U.S. But I woke up early and I said, well, I should really find out what's going on. So thanks very much for participating. And I just was able to join just now, so I don't really have questions, but I just welcome you to ICABR and hope that the next time we have a conference, you'll be able to come to the conference rather than having to do this virtually. So a quick welcome and thanks for coming, and excuse me. And I hope you'll participate in some of the other sessions also that are coming up today and tomorrow and actually over the next week or so. So welcome and thanks for your papers. Back to you, Regina.
Thank you, Carl. Thanks so much joining us at 3 o'clock in the morning. We truly appreciate it. And I think it really shows how much also ICABR values that having you young researchers from Africa on board in our quest to promote the bioeconomy. So thank you, Carl. Now let's go to the question and answers. So you can put questions Q&A in the chat, and we have Jorge Celare asking a question. I can actually, Jorge, I can invite you to come to the discussion here, and then you can actually, you should be with us now, and you could actually ask the question yourself if you like. If you unmute your phone, Jorge, then you can ask your question.
Hi, do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Hi, Jorge.
Yeah, hi, thank you. So yeah, I have a question to Africa. Yeah, thank you very much for this very interesting presentation. I was just wondering if you could expand a little bit more on the environmental benefits of adopting insect-based feeds as opposed to more traditional chicken feeds. And also I was, I'm completely new to this topic, so I was wondering how feasible it would be to actually do insect rearing on farm. Is that at all feasible? Does that require too much technological investment from the side of the farms, or even maybe at the community level? If you could expand a little bit more on these issues, it would be great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jorge. Two interesting questions. What is really the environmental benefit, and can the farmers rear the insects themselves? Africa, over to you.
Okay, thank you so much for the question. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, you're audible. We can hear you very well.
Thank you so much for the question. First of all, insects are environmentally friendly in the sense that they're naturally available in the ecosystem, and their use in production, say like mass production of insects, involves low carbon footprint. It does not emit a lot of greenhouse gases, and this aspect whereby insects, what they feed on is organic waste, and they say food from like waste from restaurants, or like even from the households or from hotels, something like that. That is what they feed on, and this way it helps to reduce the, say, a garbage pileup that you see in most countries. And then what they, after they feed on this environmental or organic waste, the result can be used as fertilizer for crop production. So it creates this sufficient or cyclic and environmental kind of protection aspect. And then when it comes to the feasibility, so far what we are trying to do as ICIPE is to look for cost-effective investment or like tools, whereby even smallholder farmers, whatever they have, the small shares that they have, we work with that and we see how they can be converted to support mass rearing of insects. But so far what has been established is that it is safer, or it is better to have it on a large scale kind of production. That way the profits are, you're sure of getting the profits. But for now, small scale farmers, because even poultry waste, pig waste can be used as a substrate for these insects. So you can have your small structure there, and then you start rearing these insects, and then you feed them occasionally to chicken as a sort to supplement the commercial feed.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that really answered the questions, Jorge. So let's see whether we have additional questions. I do actually not see one in the Q&A, but you can actually also just raise your hand, or also the presenters, of course, themselves can ask questions to your fellow presenters if you have any questions. Anybody? Maybe you think a little bit about your questions, then maybe I could ask a question to our first presentation to Toyin on this renewable energy. One of your conclusions or recommendations was that one should subsidize these energy sources because they really improve household well-being, as your study has shown. Do you have some assessment? What would be the prospects that this will become self-sustaining even without subsidies? If you look at it, solar technologies have seen a lot of price reductions in recent years. So is it within reach to have these renewable sources even without subsidies? Maybe you can comment on that, Toyin.
Okay, thank you very much for that question. In terms of the sustainability, if we don't have these subsidies in place, I think it's important to know that majority of the people that we're talking about here are poor rural households who in themselves may not be able to afford. And if we look at some of the findings from the study, we saw that for most of the people that adopted, they actually had some form of remittances coming in, from other locations, maybe from their children that had migrated to other places, which might be one of the reasons why, or one of the reasons that makes it possible for them to be able to afford it. So we're looking at a situation whereby we can still come up with cheaper technologies, these technologies that are cheaper and affordable to the people. But before we are able to scale and come up with cheaper options, the issue of subsidy may still be pertinent.
Okay, thank you. I think that's a very good point. Yeah, we have to look at how poor are the households and help them get started. So thanks a lot.
Yeah,
let's see. Meanwhile, I do actually still not see any other question in the Q&A. Maybe any one of the participants, Lina, Patience, Srinivasa, and Vanji. Anybody of you has a question?
I have a question, please.
Africa, you have a question. Please go ahead.
I have a question to the second presenter. I think he's called Tunde. About his model or the results of his model, I saw a lot of insignificant p-values, and I'd like for him to kind of repeat the interpretation of those results.
Tonji, over to you if you want to share your slide again to look at this results and explain why some of the factors may not have been significant as Africa observed. Please, over to you.
Okay. In the study, we used 4 approaches, and the first approach is about interaction patterns. We assess the interaction patterns to see what can limit a successful conservation program of the two tilapia species. And when computing in the interactions, we saw that the interaction between the sampling rivers and the fishes was not significant. So this was removed from our model. In our model, we just keep the interaction fish species, water of origin, and the interaction fish species and fish sex. That's what it means.
Oh, okay, there was another
and the other models are already established model. So we just use them to make our calculation or computing. Okay, this is the formula we call condition factor. It helps evaluating the degree of fish well-being in a rivers. Okay, and here there is a relationship between the length of the fish and their age. Okay, here is the growth performance index that help evaluate the performance of the population. Will this population decrease over years or not? This is the model that help assessing this. Okay, so here is just to this model just helps to know the age at which we will not have fish in the rivers. Okay, that's what I can say about the various model that I used.
Okay, Africa, do you have a follow-up question?
No, that's okay.
Okay. Okay, thank you so much, Tonji, for explaining this a quite sophisticated approach. Yes. Go ahead.
This is just the condition factor, and as I said, the condition factor helps evaluate the degree of fish well-being. And when the condition factor is upper 3, this means that fish have been relatively adapted to the environment.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Maybe I can ask a follow-up question. If I were your Minister of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources in Benin, and I would ask you, can you tell me in a nutshell, what can I actually do to promote this conservation? What's the most important policy recommendation that comes out of your study? Maybe you can tell us that.
Yeah, I have made a lot of recommendations, 7 recommendations.
Yeah,
and
but just the most important one. Which one is the most important one?
The most important is encouraging aquaculture of mangrove-dependent aquatic species. So this means they will choose a species that lives in the mangrove and domesticate the species and promote the aquaculture of this species, and that can help women and young people that are dependent of these ecosystems. That will help them to have to have income alternatives. Okay, so the ministry can orient them to aquaculture of mangrove-dependent species.
Okay, great. Thank you, Tonji. I hope your minister will actually have the opportunity to hear and follow your recommendation. Thank you, Tonji. I think we can also stop there. Sorry?
Okay. I will let them know.
Yeah, you have to. Okay. Okay, now you could stop your screen share, and then we can see whether we actually have other questions here. I don't still see any in the Q&A. Maybe anybody of the panelists or anyone of the participants has a question. Tonji, you can just stop the screen share, then we can see each other better. That's all right. Thank you. Okay. Anybody has a question to anybody else or anybody of the participants? Can invite you to join the panelists here. You can ask your question directly if you want to. We may still be thinking about some questions. Maybe let me ask a question to Oluwakemi. Very interesting presentation. What for you also presented different policy recommendations. What would you say the most, maybe you can give some examples of projects or programs in Ondo State that actually have trying to pursue these goals that you have? Any experience with projects that try to improve food security? Maybe you could share some of those insights. Oluwakemi, I think you have to unmute your audio so that we can hear you.
Yes, from my studies, from my findings, I said we need to, in the study area, there's a need to reduce the household size, and also to make sure that people are also educated, because that will help in food security status of the household and households in the study area. I think those are the major findings that I made mention of.
Okay. And did you see any connection to the type of agricultural production? I mean, you said you had a large share of households that have non-agricultural income resources.
Yes.
Yeah.
In the study area, majority of them are civil servants, and they just have farming as their secondary occupation. That's why we had like 11.2% of the respondents being involved in farming, because the major occupation is in the study area is civil service and trading. Majority of them are involved in trade.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for sharing this. Yeah, so family planning programs, it seems, in combination with education would improve food security in your study area.
Yeah.
Okay, I still see no other Q&A. May I encourage all of you, including also the participants, to ask any questions you have to our panelists. Anybody? Jorge, you have another question. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So just a follow-up question to Oluwakami. So if I understood correctly, then most of the farmers in the sample are not actually farmers. They work somewhere else, not necessarily on farm. Is that correct?
I think you have to unmute your audio.
They are not farmers. They are just the households.
Okay. So the research is conducted in an urban area.
Yes.
Okay. So do you have any insights regarding the role of different channels to purchase food in those urban areas? How are, for example, supermarkets or local markets developed in the area? In which different channels do people often buy their foods from?
Yes, considering the level of income, because that was not included in the table presented. Considering the level of income, because majority of them, earn below 100,000 naira, per month. And if you look at that in euro, I think it would be around like 200, less than 200 euro. Less than 200 euro per month. So because of that, there are supermarkets. Anyway, there are supermarkets, but because they can, majority of them cannot afford to buy things at a supermarket because it's very, very expensive. They prefer to go to open markets to buy things, and some of them even go to the local markets. We have some of them also go to the farm gates. They go to the local markets to purchase their what they need for the family.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, yeah, supermarkets and local markets. Okay, thank you. Do we have other questions or comments from the audience or from the panelists themselves? Maybe while waiting for other questions, let me also ask another question to Africa. This issue of insect-based food sources actually also discussed in Europe. Europe changed a legislation that makes even insect-based food directly available to consumers. But there's always this concern that, quite a number of consumers may find this almost disgusting if there are insects used in the food chain. And I was wondering what the perceptions were in your focus group discussions. Was there any concern that consumers may find this kind of awkward if these insects are used to produce their chicken dish?
Okay, thank you for your question. Actually, even when you were conducting the trainings where farmers had the hands-on training how to rear this particular insect, most of them, the first day they could not touch the larvae of the black soldier fly. because there are, that phobia towards worms. But then, like, as the days progressed on, they became more comfortable with this issue, and I'm familiar with the issue of disgust. But when it comes to perceptions, because even I was able to conduct a cross-sectional survey whereby I'm analyzing perceptions of farmers, and most of them are willing to use this particular type of insect. And this insect, the advantage is that it's inedible. It does not go into human food chain, human food consumption chain. But what we do, even what other studies have found, is that people or consumers prefer the invisible insects, whereby they are mashed or ground and then they are used in formulation of feed, as opposed to whereby they are used in production of food, whereby you are able to still see some elements of the insects. So this, but we have very few studies which have done it from the producer point of view. Producers who now deal with the purchasing of feed, what do they feel or how do they perceive this particular type of feed which has insects in it? And the advantage is that in African, I can say like in African culture, insects are they're collected, even though like they use traditional methods, they're collected and fed to the chicks. So most of them are familiar with this concept. And even as you're trying to say globalize this aspect, and even they contribute to legal frameworks, the aspect of invisible insects, we hope that it will have more acceptance, because now you can't see the insects, so you don't have that aspect of neophobia or issues like that. And with awareness creation and all these issues pertaining to environmental conservation, we also hope that it will change the perceptions of these people who have neophobia.
Well, thank you. Thanks for sharing this. Invisible insects, we learned something. Carl may also have a follow-up question. Carl, please.
Yeah, I'm sorry I missed I just got the end of your presentation. So how did you choose, or how did your group choose this particular insect that's the focus of your feed production? Is it, I mean, it's a local insect that is easy to multiply and produces very rapidly or something like that? Or how did you decide what insects to use?
Okay, thank you for the question. So yes, this insect was, since ICABR mostly does research on insects, so it has a wide array of insects to choose from, and the black soldier fly form was a good candidate for this particular type of feed ingredient because of it's locally available. Particularly in the wild here in Kenya, and in most parts of the world, it's locally available. It's just like the housefly, but it has higher levels of crude protein. So partnering with other also research organizations, they were able to narrow down on this insect. Together with others, they're trying to look for ones which are more locally available in different parts of the country, in different countries in the world. So it multiplies also easily. It has a very short reproduction cycle that is of like 12 days. So and then it has high levels of crude protein compared to other insects. So it was as a result of multiple research, as a result of research on multiple types of insects. And there's a question here.
There's a question from Srinivasan. I have just invited Srinivasan to the panel here. Srinivasan, would you like to ask the question yourself? You just have to unmute your phone and then you can ask the question to Africa yourself if you like. Srinivasan, you would like to ask the question? Doesn't seem to work, unfortunately. So Srinivasan was asked, has asked whether it is possible to use insects as human food, and yes, in what form? And is there any allergic issue? Maybe, Africa, you're the expert on the insects. Maybe you can ask Srinivasan's all of Srinivasan's questions.
Okay, so yeah, it's possible to use insects as human food. They're used in different cultures all over the world. We have people who feed on insects for as a source of protein. I can speak for Kenya. In my culture, people harvest the locusts, some sort of termites. They fry them and they consume them. But then to other people, this is very a new type of food, and they may have a lot of, say, like resistance or some phobia or even allergies have been recorded by some studies. And what other people advise, or like what researchers advise, is that now they use it as invisible insects. They grind it and then they mix it, say, with baking flour or those aspects of those elements of cooking, so that the final products does not have any traces of the insects, because in some cases, you may have even chocolates which are decorated by some sort of insect, so you're able to see the actual insect. But by creating some sort of like diversity, whereby those people who are allergic, or not even allergic, but those people who have phobia towards these insects, they're able to consume it without seeing the actual insects. But then the aspect of labeling also becomes very important for people who are allergic. So also part of my study, the broader study, is on identifying the attributes that people would prefer on these types of products that have integrated insects, whereby in the labels they're explicitly shown, or they have logos which show that this is an insect-based product, so that people who are allergic or people who still having a difficult time accepting these novel types of food are made aware, and it also influences their purchasing behavior. So yes, it's very possible to use insects as human food, but then we need to give people different choices so that they can it can influence the purchasing behavior.
Well, thank you very
Yes.
much. And Srinivasan has put
please.
in the.
One question.
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay.
Tunji, go ahead.
Okay. The question is not so different from the previous one. I just want to ask you, have you considered using insect-based feed to feed the fish in aquaculture?
Oh, here's the connection between the insects and the fish. Any insights on on this one, Africa?
Yes. Yes, we have ongoing studies where fish producers are being given insect-based feed to feed the fish and to evaluate the performance and check on the differences between this particular feed and the traditional feed, and see if there are improved, say, growth, or even maybe some other side effects that maybe would not have been expected, and things like that. So fish is part of also the study done by CP. We have pigs, fish, and chicken. So those are for now, those are the candidates that we are using to test this particular type of feed and just monitor their performance and see if it's something that can be widely accepted.
Well, thank you, Africa. I think we are now also coming to the end of our time. I also do not see any other questions. Srinivasan says, thank you. He could actually listen also to your answer. So that brings us to the end of this panel. I think we had a very exciting panel, very innovative, interesting research that we could share. It will be available, the recording on the website of ICABR, so that others can actually also look at it. And I would like to, as Carl already did, like to encourage you to continue participating in this conference. Please also submit papers to next year's conference. We hope that at least partly we can do it in presence, but in whatever form, we will also have it next year. So we look forward very much to continue interacting with you. And maybe since our president is with us, maybe Carl would like to say a final word to the panelists.
You guys are really taking advantage of me. I mean, here it is 4 a.m. and I'm supposed to give all these great, pronouncements or something like that. But I think I've already said my piece, and I was quite intrigued by some of these studies, and I apologize for not being able to participate a little more. But that's the way this conference is structured. We're trying to make it accessible to as many people as possible, and so not only if you guys can participate in the rest of it, but tell your friends and colleagues also about the conference. It's free and available to everybody, and the more people we have involved, the more interesting it is. So thanks again, and I hope you'll participate some more this year and next. Okay.
Well, thank you, Carl. Also, thank you to Travis, who has been in the background, also helping us with technical support. Thanks to all of you again, and I look forward to seeing you in some of the other sessions. And this concludes our webinar today. Bye-bye. Take care.
Bye.